Hey everyone, welcome to. Oh, that's right. This is Behavioral Observations. Don't adjust your podcast player. This is indeed the Behavioral Observations podcast. You are in the right place, and we're doing the usual thing that we've done over the last few years at this time of year. My friends at ABA Inside Track and I are doing the 2024 year in review, and we thought we'd do something a little bit different this year. And we get into that very quickly in this episode, so I'm not going to belabor it too much here, but we decide to really put the focus back on you, the audience, and look at some of the episodes that you seem to respond to the most as measured by downloads, I guess. There's obviously other ways to figure out the level of engagement that people have with these shows, but we wanted to see what resonated with you, and so we did more or less a countdown of some of our more popular shows from this year, and maybe speculated as to why they might have, gotten the response that they did. And so we take turns going through our lists, and I think it's a lot of fun. So it's a little more upbeat than our usual fare at this time of year. And so I really enjoyed putting this one together with the gang at ABA Inside Track. I guess I just want to pause and reflect a little bit just personally here and just remind you guys, which I guess I don't remind you often enough, how much I appreciate everyone tuning into this podcast. During this calendar year, I had the opportunity to speak at several events. I met, dozens, if not hundreds of listeners, and I am just incredibly grateful for everyone who takes time out of the day to tune in to Behavioral Observations. It really means a lot. This podcast has truly changed my career as a behavior analyst, and it's hard to describe. And so I'll stop babbling here and get you closer to the episode itself. Before we get to that episode, though, another thing I'm grateful for is the people who help make this podcast happen. I want to give a shout out to who is probably the longest tenured sponsor of the podcast, and that's Barbara Gross with HRIC Recruiting. So if you are looking for a job, if you're moving, if you're about to graduate, if you have questions about your resume, if you have questions about pay, if you just really want to know if the grass is greener on the other side, go to hricolorado.com and schedule a confidential conversation with Barbara Gross right away. She really, really knows her stuff in the field of ABA and jobs and everything that goes along with that. We're also brought to you by by Behavioral Observations. I guess it's a little meta, I suppose, but we do repurpose some of these episodes into continuing education units. You can go to behavioralobservations.com/get-CEUs to see what we have to offer. And I'm always adding new episodes. We have over 60 across a wide variety of topics with some of your favorite podcast guests. So learn while you commute, while you walk the dog, while you go to the gym, or whatever else you do when you listen to podcasts. So you can do some multitasking, learn some great stuff along the way, pick up some CEUs, and help keep the lights on here at Behavioral Observations. We're also brought to you by the upcoming Verbal Behavior Conference. You got to go to behaviorlive.com or just go to the show notes for this episode and search for Verbal Behavior Conference. The 2025 event is coming up in March. It is going to be great, and there's a full day workshop with Dr. Barbara Esch preceding the two-day event, the two-day conference. It's in Austin, Texas, but if you're not able to make it to Austin, we'll certainly miss you, of course. But again, through the magic of Behavior Live, you can attend, and the virtual experience is actually really quite good. We actually get a lot of interaction from the online community during the event itself, which is a lot of fun. But if you do go there, it's a very, very intimate setting. People are always chatting up the speakers. The speaker, it's not an overwhelmingly huge event, and you can have some personal interactions with everyone there. It is really quite remarkable. Go to behaviorlive.com and search Verbal Behavior Conference 2025, or again, just go to the show notes of this episode. Last but not least, we are brought to you by thebehavioraltoolbox.com, and that is the new project I have put together with my colleagues, Dr. Polly Gavoni and Anika Costa. We have 3 courses for school-based professionals at thebehavioraltoolbox.com. The latest one we're really proud of is all about using motivational interviewing to get staff buy-in. That's right. And, it's funny. I actually had someone who bought the course who does not work in schools. She's a dog trainer, and she wanted to learn about motivational interviewing so she could get more buy-in from her clients. Because, of course, as we all know, she doesn't really train the dog. She trains the owners. And so she needs to get buy-in for them to do things differently with their dogs. And boy, I could use her services, but that's a podcast for another day. So long story short, even if you're not in schools, check out thebehavioraltoolbox.com/courses and look at our new course on getting staff buy-in with motivational interviewing. And I guess one more thing I'll say is that a lot of people we've got some recent new members of the Patreon community. So I don't mention that frequently either, but if you want to get these episodes in advance and ad-free, it's just the conversation itself, no music, no ads, no preamble from me. You just get right to the point. Go to patreon.com/behavioral observations to learn more. All right. I think that's it for opening remarks. So without any further delay, please enjoy this really fun year in review of 2024.
Welcome to the Behavioral Observations Podcast, stimulating talk for today's behavior analysts. Now, here's your host, Matt Cicoria.
Who do we have here, podcast friends? Let's introduce ourselves as we end this magnanimous year of ABA.
It's me, Jackie. Last time I'm going to get to go second until 2026.
And it's me, Diana.
Hey guys, it's Matt here from Behavioral Observations. And it's about time it's that time of year where we do that collab of looking at the year in review. And we have some different plans this year, right, than the usual fairs, right, guys?
That's right. We're trying something. And I'm Rob.
Yeah, you didn't say
I didn't say mine. No, I was trying something. Well, I was trying something different because it's like a special end of year, you know?
Yeah.
I didn't, the listeners could not see the flashing lights.
On your intro. Yeah.
No, it was perfect. We had kick dancers. We had a lot of lights. We had explosions. You couldn't see or hear them because our mics are just too good for getting up close to us, our voices.
All that ambient noise.
It was amazing if you were here, but only we were here. So we'll be doing a review kind of the year. And like Matt was saying, we're going to do something a little bit different this year. I think sometimes when we go over broad topics, there's a lot of things that are kind of sometimes fun to talk about. We thought, let's look at some trends that we're seeing in some of the episodes that were resonating with listeners this year, and maybe why that would be. Is this a giant trend in episode content or a fluke? Who knows? But we've got about 20 different episode types of topics that we'll be discussing to review the year, and then we'll kind of wrap up, and then we'll snuggle away and hibernate until next episodes come out to wrap up the year. So with that,
sounds like an excellent plan to me.
Let's begin. Matt, do you want to start, because this was your cool idea? So sort of, you want to describe generally how we're crunching some numbers here?
Yeah. So one of the things I thought was fun to do, it would be to look at the episodes that were most popular with listeners in the year 2024 in terms of number of downloads. And we just kind of picked downloads within the first month of being published. And unfortunately, that's going to disadvantage some of our more recent episodes that haven't been around in 2024 or have just been recently published. And so I did try to look back into late 2023 as well, personally. But basically what we're trying to do here is to run through our top 10 most downloaded episodes using that standard that I just described, the most downloaded within the first 30 days. Because you can imagine that session 1 has been downloaded a gazillion times because it's had almost a decade to be downloaded. So we had to create, as behavior analysts, we have to make sure the data are we got to compare apples to apples here. So we're going to alternate our top 10 episodes, go back and forth, starting with 10 and going down to 1. If we have time, there's some honorable mentions, I think, that I'd like to shout out as well. And so let's get started. So do you guys want me to take the first one?
Start us off, Matt.
All right. So number 10 is lessons from implementing practical functional assessment and skills-based treatment. That's session 276, not that far ago, with Dr. Tony Camilleri. So this was a fun one. Tony is kind of, I call him Greg Hanley's consigliere I can say that as a fellow Italian American, So Tony, if you haven't met him, you should. He's a sweetheart of a guy, very giving of his time. And fun fact, he actually helped me with some of my website stuff because they were running similar, what do you call them, learning management systems. They use the same learning management system platform that I do on behavioral observations. And so I've met Tony a handful of times, and he's been very generous with his time on some technical stuff in the background. But that episode was very popular because he kind of recapped a lot of the work that, the FTF group has been doing over the last 10 years and how the skills-based treatment process has evolved over time. So it's session 276.
Yeah. And I've seen Tony talk. He was at Stone Soup this year, the virtual conference. I saw him talk there. I know I'd done a grant in our school district to do some kind of FTF webinars. And so got to see a lot of Tony talking about PFA and SBT. And he does, like you're saying, Matt, he does have it's a succinct and very gentle way of sort of just sharing some of the themes that come up in SBT, with the shorties. And it sounds very kind coming from Tony. I don't think I've actually met him in person to tell him that, but that's always the impression I get when I've seen him speak on the subject. So very exciting, but not surprising. I think that the people would be into that episode.
All right, cool. Let's hear number 10 from you guys.
All right, Diana, you were our number cruncher, so why don't you take the lead on that?
Oh, sure. So our number 10, and I will say that we had the same situation, right? So there are some episodes that came out really recently that I would, it wouldn't be surprising to me if they ended up within this range, but they just emerged. So we can't consider those necessarily. But for the rest of the year, number 10 on our list was setting up supervision systems at work. And that was with Kim Held as the guest. It was number 253 for anybody who wants to go back and look at it. And that was the one you folks remember where she told us about the it's almost like a personality test, kind of cool system that they use at their workplace, identifies sort of your work personality and the ways in which you may interact with others, may have challenges interacting with others. And she used it as a guideline for how to kind of set up best practice systems, which was really cool. And we all got a kick out of getting to practice with that. So I think a lot of people enjoy listening to that episode.
That was terrifying in its ability to sort of predict this is who you are at work. It's like, oh my God, you've seen through everything I've done to get to the real me.
That's awesome. Kim and the rest of the crew at their company, they're longtime New Hampshire behavior analysts as well.
Yeah.
Very, very influential in the state. And again, very, very nice folks as well.
Yeah, she's a cool lady.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. I guess it's back to me. Okay. Here we go. Number 9, how to assess early COIC skills with Dr. Barbara Esch. So this is one of the ones, it's funny because I don't do, what you consider, autism intervention per se. And so I find these more granular verbal behavior episodes intellectually interesting, but I don't get to put these things into practice. And so a lot of times when I have these types of interviews, I'm like, oh, okay, that's really cool. And again, it didn't register to me how much shows like this would actually resonate with the folks who actually do this work and find the stuff like directly applicable to what they do. So this would be a good example of that. I've got, I think, a couple more in that category as well that we can talk about shortly.
I mean, were you shocked specifically at COICs? Was there anything you thought it was a COICs, or had just been a little while since you'd had one that had that granular component? Because the COICs feel like the operant that it's like, yeah, COICs, whatever.
Exactly.
Let's move. Mans, that's where it's at. Tacting, that's what we need.
Yeah, again, this is my perspective from not living in that world every day, and puzzle to get an individual to progress on on one of these operants. So I thought it was very, very interesting and maybe a little in the weeds. Apparently not. So that's cool. That's wicked cool, as we'd say here in New England. That the listeners really want to dig into this stuff in a meaningful way. So I was very, very pleasantly surprised to see that one clock in at number 9.
Very cool.
All right.
You know what? COICs, they're getting their due. They deserve some extra time.
They deserve
Say
some
what?
extra time.
Just kidding.
Oh, yeah. Good one, Diana.
It's more like an intraverbal right there, Diana. That's not...
Say what? All right,
or
Jackie.
demand. I guess demand. Jake, you want to hit number 9?
Oh, yeah. So number 9 for us was episode 273, Schedule thinning and FCT. This one, I am shocked.
I'm shocked by a lot of our list.
Yeah, me too. Like this one, I mean, I thought it was a fine one. It was fine, but it's, it wasn't like one that I would choose as our top 10. But I guess a lot of people are doing functional communication training, and so it's probably applicable, right? And we also know that FCT is on the BACB task list. So that is also helpful. That might be why people have been listening to it, right? Because they're brushing up on their skills before they take their exam. But yeah, this one on my list was not like oh my gosh, wow, it's like revolutionary, but people loved it. So go them and us.
And this episode is definitely like standing on the shoulders of giants kind of episode, because we previously had an episode with Dr. Mashid Gamagami, and before that, an episode with Dr. Jeff Tiger, where we touched on this exact topic in very similar ways in both of those past episodes. So I think this continues to be a topic that people really want to hear about, probably for the reasons that you're saying, Jackie. It's very practical.
I also wonder with something like that, is there a component where, I know this happens to you guys. It happens to me a lot. You meet people at conferences and things like that, and be like, oh, my supervisor or my professor, assigned this podcast to listen to.
Yes.
And I'm always of two minds about that. On the one hand, I'm very grateful. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. And on the other hand, I'm like, somewhere out there's some student saying, damn it, I have to listen to behavioral observations again. Can't stand that Matt Sicoria. It takes too long to ask his questions. He's got all sorts of filler words. It's not focused.
Matt, in your defense about the question,
the episodes are too long.
I think that is, sure. I think that is just a part of, you do the show long enough, you kind of I definitely had a crisis of faith where I was like, my questions just never end anymore. Like, I used to ask succinct questions, and I just stopped at some point. Like, I just got tired of asking questions, and it's like, I must do a lecture before I get to the question, and then it's hidden. Like, it's a game I'm playing with nobody. But so I feel you there. Yeah. I think it's just time.
I call it the long wind up.
Yeah.
So anyway, I know that's probably not the most common response, but it just, there's part of me that just wonders, like, is someone out there like, oh, damn it, I got to listen to this podcast again?
So, yeah. Anyway. So you probably get, I know we probably all gotten the sort of like, oh, I was, I always worried like, oh no, like that was your graduate experiences. You had to listen to, I'm so sorry.
I wish there was a podcast about Honig and Staten when I was in graduate school. But anyway, that's all right. So I guess it's my turn, right?
Yeah, this looks, I love this. I'm glad this topic was one that was resonating with listeners.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. This one was a no-brainer. Restraint and seclusion in public schools. And that's with our mutual friend, Dr. Matt Broadhead.
Sir Matthew Broadhead.
Sir Matthew.
Yeah, to you guys, maybe. No.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
Really
What can you say about this topic that hasn't been said already? It's something that definitely it's one of those things there's never going to be an easy answer to. And one of the things I like about talking with Matt is that Matt has become a very good friend of mine, and we disagree about a ton of things too. Like, and it's fun. It's not like, we don't take it personally. We can have interesting, nuanced, dialogues about these sorts of things. And I see where he's coming from, and I believe vice versa, not to speak for him. And so we did get into a little bit of that in this episode. Nothing outrageous. And I think the Venn diagram had, considerable overlap in terms of where our interests and values did lie on this matter. That's why it's always fun to have him on the show, regardless, because he's a hoot. And then secondly, the topic and the nuance associated with, I think, merits that type of rational discussion. So, or at least I hope it was came off as rational. So yeah, that was number 8.
Matt, quickly, has there been a change? Because I know Massachusetts recently changed and is looking very closely at laws around timeout. Has New Hampshire had anything recently kind of similar, or has it sort of been the same as the past couple years that you know of?
Like timeout in school settings?
Yeah, specifically timeout in school settings.
If there is, I'm not familiar with it.
Okay. It's just become like, I think the last year or so, there's been a lot of changes in terms of how it's logged and how it's... And one of the things that drives me, I think this has been the year of something that's been grinding my gears is a sense of how behavior works. You sort of get the sense that a lot of people don't understand how behavior works in a way that sometimes I just want to let go and say, well, we're all working for the same goal. And sometimes it just gets under my skin of like, no, you're wrong. That's not how it works. That's not how it goes. You're making rules based on fallacious assumptions of human behavior, and I don't care for it. Yeah. So I didn't know if there had been some changes, because there's a very a lot of language around like being calm and calming down and just sort of missing a lot of the point of why any sort of timeout, not so much, I mean, seclusion certainly never appropriate, but like they just time out or time away and kind of conflating a lot of terms that have been around for a long time. So I wasn't sure if that any of that had come up in the conversation due to any like recent changes.
No. And I'll just make one comment at the risk of lengthening this episode longer than need be, and then we can move on. But I would just say that it seems like the people who write those regulations haven't been in the position to support individuals who are having severe problem behavior. Yeah. I'll just leave it at that. Because if they had to live by the rules that they're creating, they might have a different perspective. So
you ditto.
That's it. There's a lot more to say on that. I'm not going to go there, but
we'll save it for our own other episode, follow-up episode.
I was just going to say, I think that Matt Broadhead is like the Beto O'Rourke of behavior analysis.
All right.
Just me?
Number 7, Diana.
No, we're on number 8.
We're on number 8. Sorry, I'm looking ahead.
Yeah. Well, why don't you do one? You can take a turn.
I'm kind of talking all the time, but okay, I'll take a turn. This was our episode 268, our discussion on neurodiversity. And we did a series of neurodiversity this year where we sort of had we had a panel episode where we talked with a number of professionals in the field of behavior analysis who identified as neurodivergent. And we did some general episodes. We talked to some other experts, and it was something that I don't know if we originally planned for it to be kind of a series, but it was one of those episodes where it was like, well, we've got a bunch more in the pipeline, like right off the bat. Let's do the next one. It was really exciting to talk about. We have one of our book clubs coming up I want to say this, I think it's our spring book club, is on neurodiversity. It's a book on neurodiversity. So it really sort of been a big theme over the past year. And I'm glad that it's been resonating. I'm glad people have been hearing themselves or hearing more about individuals that they can be working with or have been working with, and just thinking about neurodiversity beyond just, clients, but really about the field as a whole and society as a whole. And it's very exciting. And I'd like to think that is, again, where, do we know for sure? No, but that's where some of the interest in the topics that we did around neurodiversity came from.
Very cool. Yeah, I have a more, not saying neurodiversity per se, but an autism related show that we can talk about in a couple of spots. So I don't want to get ahead of myself here. So there's definitely a lot of interest in that general area. So we'll get to that in a couple of slots. But right now at number 7 is for behavioral observations is session 257, mentoring students, the future of ABA and the problems with ignoring. And that's with Dr. Tim Vollmer. So again, this was a real fun one. Much like Tony Camilleri, Tim is like just one of the nicest folks you're going to meet in ABA, and another guy who's very generous with his time. And so when I appreciated the opportunity to chat with him across a range of topics, which is why the episode title is kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
That was one of the ones, I don't know if you guys run into this when you have a show that like kind of spans a number of different things. And it's like, what the heck am I going to call this thing?
It's tricky because so many podcasts, I think as podcasts as an art form have sort of evolved. I feel like a lot of the podcasts I listen to that are very popular or they're on like a variety of topics, they sort of just turn away from like, well, the topic is blank, but we're just going to talk about whatever, and occasionally keep coming back to the central one, which I know for us, I'm sure for you too, Matt, it's like, we can't go that far off base. Like we can't be like, so what movies are you watching in the middle of our, episode on extinction? But sometimes, getting the segues or talking about the related fields, I think that is part of the medium of podcasts.
Yeah.
So, I think it's just, we bake it in now. I think it's totally fine.
Yeah. And I think with Tim being in the field and making all these contributions for decades and decades and decades, he had so many awesome stories. We were talking about, I think it was right after the passing of Doctors Owada and Pennypacker. And so he told some stories about those guys. He told some stories about, his time at Penn State and, college football and college basketball stuff. I mean, I was just sitting back and like, I'm here. Yeah, let's go. So that was a real fun one. And
he's a good storyteller.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Nice. All right. What do you guys got for 7?
Number 7 for us was preventing burnout. And this was a listener choice episode, which means that some of the listeners voted on what that topic was. We give them like 3 choices and they pick what they want to hear that go around. And that's what they chose. Obviously, very important topic, something that's on people's mind a lot. We called it Preventing Burnout, which may have been a little presumptuous. But it was
ambitious.
Oh, no. It was originally titled Recovering from Burnout, I think. And I was like, I don't feel like we can make that guarantee. So then we renamed it Preventing Burnout instead. But that proved to be a very popular episode.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't know how 2024 was for everybody. Some of the folks I've talked to, and usually I start the question was 2024 like really bad for anybody else? And then usually they, agree. I don't know. Most people, when you ask that question, I'm sure they're like, actually, best year of my life. Don't know what you're talking about. So it's a bit of a loaded question, but I think it was a good timing for burnout as so many things just kind of continue going wrong in a different way than they had been in previous end of year discussions. So always good to come back to burnout and how we can continue improving as a field in that area.
Yeah. That's a topic I haven't covered yet myself.
It's because you don't experience it. You're like, I am the king of non-burnout. I don't need that. I got myself my own studio. I'm killing.
It's eating cheeseburger.
It's a hypothetical construct.
Yeah.
I've heard so much about this in textbooks, but
people talk about this thing.
What is
They
it?
tact. I can imagine. Can you imagine like David Palmer, like
Right?
like, if you're on a train in Kazakhstan, you would tact it as no. I'm just kidding. That's my terrible David Palmer.
I could hear it and it was pretty
no,
good.
definitely.
Good. Okay, I'm glad I'm not too far.
It's a distinct.
I think David Palmer is awesome, by the way.
He is awesome.
I kid because I love. So, all right, where are we? Number 6. Clocking number 6 is the 18th installment of the Inside Java series with Dr. Dorothea Lerman.
Yeah.
And of course, co-hosted with Editor-in-Chief Dr. John Barrero. And this one we talked about how to disseminate behavior analytic technologies. And Dr. Lerman basically went over an article that she had published in Java where she did an informal summary of some of the outreach work that she has done, educating the law enforcement community about working with individuals with autism. And also what was really interesting is her work with helping individuals with autism receive dental services without, getting put under or other sorts of more, kind of intrusive interventions to get people the medical care that they need. So that was a really, really interesting one. And also a student of Brian Awada, I believe. And she, again, it was right at that time. She had some nice anecdotes of, working with him and being at UF during that time. So
it's such a great line of research, especially for its utility to society at large and to groups that need that training. But I think it's a great extension of like, can we scale some of what we know about training and BST? Because that's such a barrier. And it feels like it's getting closer and closer to like, that prime time of, okay, here we go. That's it. Now we can do this at greater groups with greater numbers. So it's
Jackie and I have some students at Regis who are replicating a version of that work with the dental clients, and pretty cool. We'll let you know
awesome.
when that happens.
Yeah. I know. I don't know if you guys know Brandon Franklin. That's his. I think he's doing some doctoral research in this area, but that's also his part of what he does. Yeah, indeed, and all around bon vivant.
Yeah,
and so he works for a company that provides medical care, dental, other sorts of things for individuals with significant disabilities, and he's doing some great work in that area. The
very
article,
cool. Very needed work.
Yeah, 100%. I remember the days back when I used to work for a residential school for kids with severe disabilities, go into the doctor. Boy, stories that I won't tell right here. But anyway, her article is Putting the Power of Behavior Analysts in the Hands of Non-Behavioral Professionals Toward a Blueprint for Dissemination. I always think it's a good sign of a paper if it has the word toward in it. You know,
like that?
Like you can really, make it like, it's like, this is really important because
it's forward looking.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. She was kind enough to come on with us as well and talk about
she's
the
super
work.
cool.
She's awesome. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Jackie, you want to take what's
number 6?
Number 6. I'm losing track. Everyone's got their Google Doc. There's so many boxes. I'm losing track.
Number 6 was episode 254, Improving Your Parent Training Practices. I don't remember this one. I'm picking the ones that I actually don't remember this one.
Yeah, we talked about parent training and
I remember
sharing
talking about parent training, but we've done it in a few episodes.
I mean, when you're as good at training and parenting as we are, it just, you don't even remember that stuff. It's just so natural.
Well, one of our free episodes, 103, talks some about parent training, but then the other time that we dedicated an episode to this was episode 19.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's like a huge topic, so everyone is thirsty for information on this one. Nice. Cheers.
I'll drink to that. All right. Okay. So this one was a surprise, big time. This was session 259 with Dana Meller and Dr. Steve Ebersole, Practical Strategies for Passing the Exam. So Steve is the founder of Behavior Development Solutions.
Yep.
And Dana is the founder or co-founder of Pass the Big ABA Exam. And it was a really interesting story about what they've learned about helping tens of thousands, probably more people pass the exam. Yeah, me too.
I the BDS modules on CD.
On CD.
Oh my, yes.
2000.
I think we lost those in the move.
Oh yeah.
I still have mine.
I did mine on CD-ROM in 2002.
Nice.
So,
2005.
We weren't far behind you.
Yeah. So, I remember.
Great idea for an episode.
They came to me with it, so nice. I can't claim any editorial genius over that. And I remember the episode being well received. Again, it was a surprise because you think of most of the people listening to the show are BCBAs, or at least that's my assumption. As you guys know, podcasting is like the Wild West in terms of audience analytics. If we were on YouTube. Like the data you get from a YouTube channel are very granular, very, very precise. And podcasting is like, here's the number, here's your download number. We don't know.
Maybe.
And we redefined how we do it. So I don't know. This could mean this was always wrong or always right. Yeah, it's very frustrating.
So this was pretty cool. And so I was happy to hear that. And also they did some myth busting about what works and what doesn't work. And I think one of the takeaways I remember from the show is like, they were like, mock exams, it's like everyone wants a mock exam. We give people mock exams because that's, people expect that with these preparation things. But, it's like taking an exam over and over again does not get you, closer to passing, which I thought was an interesting insight. So, it's
really awesome idea. Love it. All right. So our number 5, Diana's helping by pointing at it on the spreadsheet for me. Thank you so much, Diana. The visual aid is planning and running awesome meetings. And this was part of our supervision series, episode, right? For the past year. And I loved this. Sometimes, and Matt, you might find this too when you do an episode, like you were saying, like a COEX, like it's fascinating. I love hearing about it, love reading about it, but I'm not going to do anything with it. So move on to the next topic. This was one that I think every agenda I have written since we did this episode, I have very clearly written exactly what we're going to talk about, how long I expect it to take. I've become very clear on like, folks, come on, we got to focus on the agenda. I've like changed how I do meetings with better and worse success depending on the group that I'm with. And it is shocking how many people just go to meetings and they're just like hanging out. And then they wonder why these meetings are such a waste of our time. So just a really great just review of what's out there on how do you hold a meeting that has a goal and therefore you will meet that goal within a timely fashion. And I know this year, my day job, we're doing a lot of PBIS work. And part of the reason I think people were like, could you do the agendas, Rob, is because I was the only one who ever came with like, these are the things we have to get done. And here are the times. And I'm terrible at timing myself to begin with.
No.
If you've heard any of our podcast episodes that are supposed to be 50 minutes, which are never 50 minutes, but this, at least in the context of meetings, there's some sort of a meeting stimulus control I have been able to learn.
Oh my Lord.
So in those early PBIS books, they had sample meeting. I can't recall the exact book. I used to have it. And it's one of those books you lend out so much, it stops coming back.
Yep.
So it's one of those. And they had all these templates in the back. And one of them were meeting templates. And they actually, in the meeting agenda, with sample agendas, and the agendas had times attached to them. We're going to spend 10 minutes talking about, the operational definition of the behavior. We're going to spend 5 minutes, blah, 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 So yeah, there's a lot of overlap in the PBAS world on that stuff. So I'm glad someone out there is running better meetings.
I mean, out of their
And
better
this is
meetings,
all-
they certainly have a timetable and goals.
Yes,
That was all anchored by the Nozick and LeBlanc article, where they were clearly frustrated that people were not running good meetings. It's like
yes.
clearly the
Yes.
subject.
I was going to ask you if that was from that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Flo came on the show a few years ago to
Yeah.
talk about that as well. And,
Oh, nice.
she definitely has done some work in that area too. All right. So where are we? We're at number 4
Yeah.
on my list. All right. This show was awesome. I love this conversation. What is profound autism and why is it important with Dr.
Excellent.
Alicia Halliday? And this was in the run up to the Profound Autism Summit,
Yep.
which by the way is happening again. I forget the actual dates.
April.
Yeah, it's in April,
25.
and they are. It's a much bigger conference. It's 2 days, and there's multiple tracks and things like that. They've expanded their capacity because there was like standing room only.
Wow.
Apparently last year, I didn't get a chance to go to it, but anyway. So I'm glad that this movement is getting traction because I feel it's an important issue, and so I'm glad people are out there trying to talk about the needs of those individuals who are most profoundly impacted with autism. And so this episode was basically like, what is it? What does it mean to be to be classified as having this level of impairment? And how does that differentiate between other areas of the spectrum? And what does it mean in terms of supports and things like that? So I think it's an area I definitely want to return to again sometime in 2025.
Very cool.
I have a lot to say, but it's like a whole episode's worth of stuff to say. So.
Yeah, I know it's not a universally held position. I've talked to some other folks, but anyway, yeah, that's.
Oh no, you shouldn't assume that I'm getting ready to disagree with
No,
you.
no,
I just
no,
think
no.
it's
I'm
a
just
topic that needs a lot of discussion.
Yeah, and that's what I thought. I didn't have any assumptions, but yeah, I'm just recognizing that there are diverse perspectives on the relevance of that. I am very much pro for having that classification for the reasons that I think will be clear if anyone wants to listen to session 258.
Yeah. Okay. In our episode number 4, that's when we're on. Number 4, this, just like you, Jackie, when I saw this, I was like, oh, I don't actually remember much about that episode, but it was error correction.
I remember that one.
We talked about error correction procedures.
In how they vary and that the results are idiosyncratic based on the learner profile, right? But I think we read like 6 articles for that one. And I remember that Rob had like much more. And we're like, nope, we only can fit it into our 50 minutes, which usually is an hour and 10 minutes. And I actually remember that one. I liked that one. So good for
And
us.
so did a lot of people. I think, again, it had a lot of presumably practical.
Well, I think one of the things that I still remember learning error correction procedures back in the day when I was still, a paraprofessional starting out, and assuming that, well, the fact that this is the error correction procedure for so many discrete trial-based programs must mean this is the most researched thing that has ever been researched. And it was a shock when you look into the research and there's like, 3 or 4 articles on the subject. They kind of all, like you said, kind of all idiosyncratic results. And to have so many people just using these various error correction procedures. And you sort of wonder, how many of you know that this is sort of maybe going to work, maybe not? We don't even have a consistent procedure for assessing whether it's an effective error correction procedure versus something that we consistently do because it's easy to train to the adult staff. So I always love any chance to come back to error correction and sort of see what's going on. And it's one of those topics that I always keep hoping someone's going to write the paper that ties it all together and says, this is it, the error correction procedure. But I increasingly don't think, and I'm getting older and older, and I don't think that's going to happen with a lot of the topics that I want someone to just write that, nope, this is the one way to do it, and everyone loves it.
If I understand the gist of or at least the conclusion of the body of research from what you guys are saying, it reminds me of the same body of work on prompting.
Yeah.
I remember a bunch of folks at the New England Center published a bunch of research on prompting in like the early to mid 2000s.
Yes.
Comparing most to least to most, blah, 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 blah. And it was like, and they had people like build like arbitrary like Lego shapes and things like that.
Yeah.
A lot of that.
And, it was like, oh yeah, there was six participants in the study, and, 2 people did better with this. And, one person, it was just basically at the end of the day, this is the applied part of the science where the practitioner has to be attuned to what is working for their specific client, and not fall prey to, a universal behavioral folklore.
Ooh, I like that. I wish there were more universal behavior folklore that actually had a basis in concrete reality. Man, now that you've said it, I like that phrase though.
Yeah.
Although I was there at that time, and it did allow them to kind of say, okay, if you're not sure what's going to work best for your specific client, use this as kind of the default procedure and evaluate how that's effective. As we've demonstrated, by and large, this often is the most efficient and effective method. And then if it's not working for your particular student, you reevaluate. So
thank you.
It's a place to start from.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So we are down to number 3. We're getting close, folks.
Oh, top 3.
Exciting stuff.
All right. This is session 254. AAC use with adolescents and adults with autism spectrum disorder. And this is with Andy Bondy.
I listened to that one.
Excellent.
It was very practical advice.
Yeah. So after I published that one, a longtime listener of mine messaged me and said, boy, Andy Bondy doesn't hold back. And I don't recall anything super controversial or he said or anything like that, but I just thought that was a funny observation because, when Andy doesn't care, like,
right.
He lets it, if he has an opinion on something, he lets it fly. And, he's not nice about it, but like, he's very direct about, where he stands on some of these things.
Maybe
and those guys have so much
vibes.
Absolutely.
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah. So
super important topic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Again, it's one of those things like I don't work with learners with AAC devices. And, and again, I thought it was interesting. It's always fun talking to Andy's. I think it was like his 3rd or 4th time on the podcast, and it's always a popular show. And I was very much surprised to see that it clock in at number 3.
I'm not. I think that it's something that a lot of people want and need to know about to best support their clients. And just because you get older doesn't mean that you don't still have AAC needs. So I love that it was like geared toward that.
Yeah. And he's really good. He does a lot of like myth busting and, folklore busting as well, especially in the article. So if you go to show notes for that episode, there's an article that we used as a kind of springboard for that conversation. That is a good read. So.
All right. Now we're in our top 3, but I forget.
I think it's Jackie's turn.
It's Jackie's turn.
Yeah, it is my turn. And I'd like to say that our top 3, rounding it out, number 3 is, I always wanted to be a top 40 producer, like
Casey Kasem.
Yeah, Casey Kasem. And
Diana, we're going to have to put a Wikipedia link in there.
Yeah.
Right? I know people are going to.
It was Casey Kasem.
Rick Dees in the weekly top 40.
Nobody knows who Rick Dees is.
I do.
Casey Kasem was the voice of Shaggy, too. I mean,
okay. But our top 3 is Toilet Training Revisited, and this was with guest Dr. Maeve Donnelly. And that is always, everyone always wants to hear about toilet training. Again, very practical, right? It's a hard thing. And she accumulated all of the research that we would ever need to know about toilet training and gave us all the information in really succinct ways.
I have a meeting about toilet training this Friday. And so I have it on my agenda. I either need to re-listen to that, or possibly more likely, I might just email Maeve and be like, do you want to Skype into our meeting real fast, or Zoom into our meeting real quick, just in case you think of anything that we're missing?
She might not want to do that.
She probably doesn't want to do that. I'll start by re-listening, and then maybe I'll just, shoot her an email.
Just play the podcast, like be like, oh, I have her on the phone, and just play.
It's like fast forward. Hold on, I'm going to fast forward this phone call just to the parts where she's talking to someone.
Just play the podcast and walk out of the room. Hit play. And then, go, watch some YouTube and come back in an hour. Yeah.
That's it. That'll get through the meeting.
She's so knowledgeable on this topic.
I'm going to have to check. I missed that one. I'm going to have to check that one out. Yeah.
You should check it out.
When people we're struggling with learners with toileting issues, man, it's just such a huge barrier to all sorts of things. So any light that we can continue to shed on that as a field is definitely going to be helpful. So.
Yeah.
All right. So, coming in at number 2 is the panel from the Verbal Behavior Conference. Again, this is another like surprise that I was like, wow, this was really more popular than I thought. And again, I'm not dissing on the panel. I mean, I love going to the Verbal Behavior Conference. It's super fun. It's happening again in 2025, folks. And so you have the opportunity to join me and the crew in Austin, Texas, or virtually through the magic of Behavior Live. And we always do a panel, and I have the best job in the world. I get to moderate the panel, and it's just I always close the panel by saying thank you for allowing me to ask your questions to these people.
Yeah,
and, I always also like play a game with myself, like because you get like 6 or 7 like super learned people on the stage. I always try to say, okay, like how few questions can we get? Because it's an hour, so it's not like a podcast. Like we theoretically could do this for as long as our kids are we can keep going. But like at a conference, you guys know this from doing your stuff on the road. You got to hit that mark at the end. You gotta close, or else people are gonna get angry and start walking out and whatnot. Yep. So I always try to play this game with myself. It's like what's the fewest number of questions? Because look, you ask a question, everyone's going to want to get in on it, right? And so everyone's going to take, but it's always a fun time. We hit on a variety of topics, like again, AAC came up, science-based treatment, clinical judgment, and lots of things like that. So as a matter of fact, I'm getting ready to publish the VBC panel from the 2024 conference.
Very nice.
In the near future. So stay tuned for that.
Oh boy. Yeah, panels they're such a treat when you get to moderate and you're just please everyone talk intelligently. Here's some questions. Go. Let's see what we get. It's so much fun. That's awesome that everyone gets to hear them if they weren't able to be there at the event.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I forget where we are. Am I doing
your turn?
My turn. Number 2, strategies for addressing escape maintained behavior, episode 261 for us, which I think featured one of our favorite research figures, which is flowcharts upon flowcharts of what do you do in these situations. I think I forget what we were recording something or talking about something the other day, and we were referencing one of the flowcharts in this episode because it just was so salient.
It's a great flowchart. It's really one of the top flowcharts, and it's from the Geiger et al. 2010 article. I looked it up to make sure.
Oh, thank you.
We could throw that in there because I knew we were going to talk about the flowchart.
So good.
It is actually a really useful resource.
We were talking about folklore, but I feel like flowchart is sort of the anti-folklore. It's like, no, we did it. We have all the work. It's in this flowchart. Just follow it, and you and your client will be it's so happy that you did. And certainly with escape maintained behavior, which I feel like, especially being in schools, a lot of folks understand behavior in ways they probably didn't, like when we were in school as students. But a lot of it boils down to, I don't want them to escape. I know they're escaping, and I don't want them to escape without a thought as to what are they escaping from? How might you make it so that they don't want to escape, rather than just using force of will to try to keep escape maintained behaviors from occurring? And that's beyond even the situations where, students or clients are escaping from tasks that they, cannot engage in appropriately. They haven't been taught the skill. So just having that ready to go, that flowchart and that discussion was just a really great review of so many just key, important challenges that individuals face.
We wanted to highlight in that episode as well that extinction is not always the answer and not where you need to go first, right? So I think that got through, and I do think that is something a lot of folks are interested in thinking about that topic and least restrictive practices. So glad to see that it made the list. All right. Moment of truth. Ready?
Number 1, coming in at number 1, session 262. No surprise here. Dr. Pat Fryman, behavior analytic approaches to counseling and therapy. What is there to say that hasn't already been said? Interviewing Pat is like the easiest thing in the world. Like you could just, give the I don't know, like he just takes it and goes.
Mm-hmm.
And
you ask one question and that's an episode.
Yeah. And that's you can just sit back and be part of the audience. And that's the, sometimes when I do chat with him, it's like, I have to kind of slap myself a little bit because it's like, okay, you're not an audience member, Matt. You need to think about what he's saying and think of a good follow-up question. And so that happens from time to time with guests that are that compelling. I had a thought that occurred to me. I was listening to, you guys know Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs?
Yes. I mean, I know the show. I've seen like the previews and stuff.
Yeah. So he has a podcast, and he's also done a lot of like, not just that he does the dirty jobs, but he's also narrated a bunch of shows on like Discovery and other sorts of things. And I was listening to him on another podcast the other day, and he has a very similar vocal quality to Pat. It was really interesting. And he has a similar storytelling style as well. And I was like, oh man, I was trying to like reverse engineer like why like these two people are so compelling to listen to, and just, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, this was a fun episode as always with Pat, where he came on and talked about, some of his work as a clinical psychologist, basically doing behavior therapy. Yeah. Yeah. We always think of it maybe cognitive behavior therapy, but he's, would say, no, I'm doing behavior therapy, and, talking about how he looks at things like anxiety and depression, and, he just gives some practical advice for people who are, struggling with, some of these mental health challenges that are, very, very commonly experienced. And he goes through some of the stats on that as well. So there's more people out there contending with these challenges than you'd think. And again, a lot of practical information about these things, and of course couched in a framed in a behavior analytic manner. So yeah, no surprise there. He's a fan favorite. So he came in at number 1 for 2024.
Oh. All right. And
okay.
Our number one
was episode 263, The Ethics of Fad Treatments. And I'm not surprised that this one was popular, because I think that this is a topic that gets a lot of needed attention, right? And the article that we focused on the most in this was the Schreck and Miller, How to Behave Ethically in a World of Fads, if anyone is familiar with that. And I think people out there who are working clinically struggle with a lot of this, because they hear about things, or parents bring things up and they want to figure out how to best approach it in a way that's scientifically based, tactful, and with the best interest of the client in mind. And it was an ethics episode too. So both of those factors probably played into it. Exactly. Yeah. But that was our number 1.
I think that was an episode I feel like we had been batting around for a number of years of how do we do this? Like, I think at one point I put together a folder and I wanted to write an episode. I think it was, and this was not meant, it was in reference to Roger Ebert's book of movie criticism. Your movie sucks. I wanted to call it Your Treatment Sucks. And that got vetoed pretty fast. So we sort of sat on it and sort of how do we want to present this? And then I think this year just kind of came together. Like, we had enough articles that covered, the topics in a way that really could focus on the ethical situation, rather than just being like, look at these treatments. That's crazy. Don't do that. You're a bad person if you do, because that's not, again, is fun maybe to record, but not necessarily to listen to, nor is it necessarily helpful, because you can't just go around telling everybody that's a bad treatment, or that's not a real treatment. You're not an ethical provider of services because your science is bad, because that's not going to win you any friends, So
no.
So we didn't do that. So if you have not listened to it, it doesn't sound like that at all. You can have your own echo chamber where you do that, probably with like a colleague, and that's fun, over drinks or dinner, you can do that, but you're not gonna be able to practically use that information unless you're really thinking about the ethics code. And it was good. It was a good exercise in talking about a tough situation in a more in a complicated context that you're going to have to be having those kinds of conversations.
Yeah, I would say that it's easy and fun to kind of dunk on these things.
It's so fun.
It's not going to, ultimately at the end of the day, we're in the business of persuasion, and we have to persuade people to do things that we feel would be beneficial to the client and the other stakeholders. And if we can't be effective persuaders, then unless we want to be doing the therapy 1-to-1 all day long, which is impractical for various reasons, we're going to have to get better at persuasion. And so I could see taking that perspective is can probably especially when you see it happening, it's probably difficult to but I think it's a better course of action. Younger me would have been like, that's dumb.
Right.
So those were our 10, but I know, Matt, you had a couple honorable mentions, and I know, from us, a couple episodes that maybe didn't, either get the most downloads that we want to share, but really, really quickly, what were some of yours?
Well, I want to make an observation first. I think it's super cool that most of the most downloaded episodes that you guys had were without guests. So credit to you guys. Hey, well done. That's pretty
Thanks.
do you have any solo shows I've done?
I think you did at least. I remember you did at least one many
Right.
years ago.
I did one. I did one. I had Pat McGreevy scheduled, and he called me and to profusely apologize that he couldn't make it for one reason or another. And I was like, oh, I have to get an episode out.
The show must go on.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's such a tough feeling.
And I was like, oh, I don't, this is not my thing. This is not my
Yeah.
format, And so anyway, all the more reason for that. I'm very impressed that you guys had your most popular episodes are sans guest. So
yes,
done.
I was
Thank you.
super surprised by that, but we have awesome guests as well. So I don't want anyone to feel bad.
Yeah. So a couple honorable mentions for various reasons. One is that, we continue to do the BOP in Espanol series with my friend Miguel Avilla.
Yeah.
And, I'm really, really happy that he's been down for this. He's been very enthusiastic about doing it. And I know it's, making the rounds in the Spanish speaking behavior analytic community. It's a huge, huge resource, I think. I say I think because I'm not fluent in Spanish. So, they could be making fun of me the whole time. I wouldn't know. But all kidding aside, I'm really happy that we're continuing to do that, and that there's some benefit that we think is happening with that. So a couple of other really quick honorable mentions, continuing with the autism theme that we've talked about a couple of times here in this show, a review of autism diagnostic practices that just session 248 with Doctors Whitney Entz and Elizabeth Sheridan. So basically going through best practices about how individuals receive the diagnosis of autism. We talked about self-diagnosis. We talked about other sorts of things that are, that are, I guess, contemporary topics in the world of autism, and things like that, and how they approach it from their, kind of university clinic settings. And that was almost, that was, neck and neck with some of these other ones for coming into the top 10. Same thing with Emily Varon, How to Understand Sleep Problems. Super important episode. And again, almost, neck and neck with some of the others at the, area of the top 10. And then just because I feel like this was like a mind-blowing episode for me, was the ethics of procedural fidelity with Dr. Claire St. Peter. I mean, Claire's great and she does so many different things, but I think the work in procedural fidelity that she's pioneered, and some of the lessons learned from her work in that area, and the huge amount of work still needed to do, and how treatment fidelity is not just something that occupies the ivory tower, but should occupy the thoughts of those of us out there in the trenches, if you will, and why it's important. So those are some 2024 honorable mentions from Behavioral Observations.
Ooh, very nice. We have our listener choice poll for the winter is coming out pretty soon. Is it out? By the time this comes out, it may already be out. I cannot keep track this time of year of when anything is supposed to come out versus when it's been recorded. But some of the procedural fidelity articles are on the list. So maybe we won't do that as an episode. We're not sure yet, but I have the articles. So I'll just read them. If they don't, we'll do it later if need be. Because you're right, Matt. Such a cool topic that is very important to the practitioner as well as in the ivory towers. Jackie, Diana, any honorable mentions?
Probably episode 278, which was an ethics book club, where we talked about Linda LeBlanc's and Amanda Karsten's book on ethics.
What was the name of that book again?
Ethics?
It was ethics. It was ethics.
Just called ethics.
That one, and then Corey Wieland's episode on PFA SBT.
Specifically, a lot of cab chaining.
Yeah.
Talk.
A lot of acronyms, but super good stuff, and really great if you're less familiar with some of that terminology. He did such a great job of laying it out. He was a super nice guest, and he brought us cookies. So, that
he is super
really
nice.
ranks you up high.
And he was
When
like,
that
"Can I come in person?"
Yeah.
That's
And-
awesome.
And he
Yeah.
said it's a thank you note.
Yeah.
It was so great.
It was like the sweetest thing I've ever seen.
Wow. He's got like legit manners.
Yes.
Jack, any honorable
that's so
mentions?
Quaint.
Yeah. Jackie, any other honorable mentions?
I can't think of the episode, but also when Aaron Leaf came and talked about.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
That
hold on.
was
I can tell
really
you that.
cool.
That was 289. These are all right in a row.
Yeah,
Aaron Leaf talked about promoting client rights
I like that.
all the way from Australia. She came and also in person.
Yeah.
And then right after that, we talked with the How to ABA
Right.
folks
Oh yeah,
about
you're in Shayna. Yeah.
yeah. Now I can't remember the title of that, but it was like advice for new behavior analysts, kind of, and
It was
that is
ethics
also
too.
proven
Ethical
to be a very
questions, yeah.
popular episode too.
And I want to shout out our episode on behavioral artistry, which was another one that it was like just
Just came out.
that just came out. So
It didn't get in the metrics.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
did. That's why it didn't make it to the top of the charts. But that was an episode that really, I think, tried to capture the ephemeral in terms of how we do the job of behavior analysis and working with other people. And it sort of touches on therapeutic rapport as well. And it was one of those like articles that I found way back when and just sort of put in the file drawer of like, we should do an episode on this someday. I wonder if there's more out there. And it's just always really exciting when kind of it all comes together over time of like, oh, it's another publication or I found this old article. We could put it all together and
Is that
have a nice discussion.
Milton Berger?
No, we didn't have any Milton Berger. It was,
It's Amy Buchspen.
Okay,
yes.
got it.
Who sent us an email to follow up on that as well. So
Right.
we'll
on.
have more to say on behavioral artistry in the new
Yeah.
year, I bet.
Well, my last episode was the one with Greg Hanley back on, and so that's when we do the 2025 year in review.
Right.
That's going to be like, you know, that will be number one, number
Yeah.
two, number three, because it's already going gangbusters, as one might imagine. So I decided to leave that one out of the analysis because it just went out recently. So
Right. Yeah.
hey, and you guys are coming up on. Have you published 300 yet?
Not yet.
No.
Okay.
We're very close to recording 299, and then we've got a couple weeks after that, and then we'll be doing a
We're doing
shindig for
We're doing
300.
an in-person funpocalypse where we are promoting the 300th episode where people can come. I'm just finishing up the Eventbrite. I had some technical difficulties where people can sign up, and we're going to give away free CEs. And we also are going to buy some pizza for everyone. And so that should be fun. It's January 9th if you want to come on all the way down Massachusetts. It's a Thursday evening.
It's just a great time to be driving.
the dark winter.
Right?
I'm visualizing my calendar in my head to see if
Yeah.
I can make this happen, but
Love
Ken, I
it.
will let you know.
If you have the time, Matt, we would love to see you.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
I would
You got to
be-
think about yours because yours must be
Yes.
also coming up.
Yeah, I don't have anything special planned for the 300.
Still time.
Yeah.
We're kind of all hitting the 10-year mark too. So we were sort of like,
Right.
do we just wait and then be like, it's episode like 368, and that's, I guess, or whatever it comes out.
Well, you guys are so consistent with publishing, like you can predict what number episode you'll be, at a certain
We try.
Whereas, I'm less so, but
Wow.
both managed to make this work.
We've both been doing this for almost 9 years,
Oh my
and we've seen a
God.
lot of podcasts come and go during that time because it is a lot of work.
Mhm.
Yes, it's
to
not
do
digging
this.
ditches. I will just, this getting back to the Mike Rowe Dirty Jobs, reference. It's, we're not going to be on a Dirty Jobs episode anytime soon.
No.
If that show was still on, it's like, you might mention Mike Rowe. Like I had to tag around with these podcasters, and the barista got their latte. They put the wrong type of milk in their latte, and it totally. But they rallied, and they, it's like, first, their mic. They lost the cable to plug their mic in, so they had to use a different mic. It was a
They're very
disaster,
upset.
but anyway, I'm sorry. I'm just getting
There's
on
a
in
lot
the
of behind
evening
the
here.
scenes work, and a
Yes,
lot of
yes.
stamina required to keep.
So
it
yeah,
going for this
you're
amount of
absolutely right.
time,
It's
so.
not, it quickly goes from hobby to job very
Yeah.
fast.
Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
'Cause I started this on a lark, and
Mhm.
here we are 9 years later.
Yeah, same, right?
Oh, boy. Yeah. No, I was
So I
always
think you
knew we'd
celebrate
do this
both.
9
I
years
think you
later.
celebrate 300. I think you celebrate 10 years.
Yes.
It's all worth celebrating.
That sounds
Yeah.
good.
All right, sounds
Well,
good, guys.
And so is the new year. Happy New Year, Matt.
Happy New
Happy New
Year,
Year, guys! Yeah, congrats on another year of podcasting, and Happy New Year to everyone in the I guess the joint audience of ABA Inside Track and the Behavioral Observations podcast.
Yes. If this is your first episode of either of our podcasts, it's an odd place to start. But guess what? We got a bunch of episodes between the two of us. Keep you busy. in
right.
600
2025.
backlog episodes.
For more than a full year, you can listen to each one of our episodes for this whole year and still
Pretty
have
much.
some to spare. Right? We have more than 354, 355,
That's true.
356.
That's a
Forgot how long a year
365
was.
days in a year. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Forgot.
that's a lot.
We did it. That was our goal. We did
Nailed
it.
it.
One Behavior Analytic podcast every day. We've done it, folks. That's it.
All right. Thanks, guys. This is a
Thank
fun
you.
format. I'm glad we decided to do it. And it's good to look back on
Yeah.
what resonated with our audience, because if it wasn't for our audience, we would not get any reinforcement for all that effort that we were just talking about.
That's
so
right.
That is true.
thanks
for
everyone for
listening,
tuning
everybody.
in 2024. And we'll hope to keep pushing out some fun content for you in 2025.
That's right. We'll see everybody in that new year. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.